Seth Clark Silberman.
Hello. You fuck me like you're playing the violin, he says. 20 minutes after, he pretends to not recognize my torso on Grindr. I tell him that I'm using that in the novel, chuckle when he says that he doesn't want to be here. In the novel or here? He happens to be at Eastern Block since there's nowhere to go out drinking in Manhattan that's not blocks from my place. Waits for my roommate to leave so that he can pee without being seen. It's 3 months after I break up with him, so he's only here to prove to himself that he's over me, under me now. I don't want anyone having any idea of me. It's not a problem that he has, since he never lets the truth stand in the way of a good story. He worries that his character will only give my friends reasons to hate him like they need him. I repeat that he's merely material, part of the jigsaw puzzle Freud writes about in Moses and Monotheism. I reach over him to grab the book so I can read it for him. Quote, even if all parts of a problem seem to fit together like they are pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, one has to remember that the probable need not necessarily be the truth, and the truth not always probable.
Woo!
Juan thinks I'm saying he's a problem. He answers his iPhone, takes it into the bathroom, tells me it's his Israeli, the one he's with the last time he comes over, the night he texts, help me, until I respond. They jerk off a couple nights a week, just baby kisses, he assures me. Acts like they're dating as if he knows what that means. Thinks he handles his affairs with something I never see in him, perspicacity. He flips through the unabridged dictionary that I take from my building's landing, where we trade things we no longer need, where I leave the translucent teddy bear piggy bank that he gives me on Valentine's Day. He explains that he goes by Juan now instead of John, not because he escorts still, but because he wants to create a life apart from his white parents. He still talks to his clients about me, has a problem with boundaries, complains about the climb to my 6-story Alphabet City walk-up. I call him Mokusov, translated for him as Brat. Defriend him on Facebook after one too many status updates about other men and drunken nights. He says he respects me now, keeps talking about the Israeli and the Algerian Jew before him. He thinks he's being funny when he says, Jews are like a used car you don't trade in because it's too comfortable. He climbs back into bed, sees that I'm finally getting around to reading that chunk of a Marcel Proust biography I found on Avenue A. I read him a quote from a letter Proust writes as an adolescent to his grandfather. Only once in a lifetime can one be so upset that one is unable to fuck. Juan says he feels that way for 2 weeks after I break up with him, as if that shows just how deeply he loves me. He's over me now. He looks lost because he doesn't realize yet that there's nothing to find. How's the hunting going there? I'm scrolling, hitting load more guys. You're too smart to be on Grindr, comes back with that ping. Charles remembers our conversation at the Cock. He wants to know if this is research, really him, but Googles me instead to see if I am who I say. Everything I do is research, I reply with 3 winking emoticons in tow. Asks if he thinks, or I ask if he thinks I can write off condoms on my taxes. He says he tries to post a Craigslist misconnection, but his DSL hiccups decides to rely on serendipity. He tells me he works for a firm that cuts tenements for condos. I tell him my mom wants me to be an architect too, and I am. I just got different materials. We negotiate dinner, then decide on lunch through Gmail because the roommates at work. I assume it's the Norwegian guy I stayed with. He tells me to wear the same blue tie, asks for my first date sex philosophy. I find it has little relationship to whatever happens after. He emoticon winks through Grindr, turns back to kiss me. After I'm done, he worries he's not in grad school, wants to know how the novel's coming along. Guess I should destroy his character a little more here. His teeth clatter me away, ready for another go. In the bathroom, his Nation subscription label reads Carlos. I give him a copy of the novel chapter that's published. I load him on Grindr again later. He asks what happens next in the novel. It's up to you. How do you want to write the story? I can be democratic. He doesn't believe that any of this is fiction, likes the writing, doesn't know what to think about its subject. In person, he thinks I'm justifying what Seth, in air quotes, does. His pupils boast emoticons of their own. If you think the sex is the point, then you need to reread it. He concedes that it's honest, doesn't hear me over the beat. Sex is a conversation between what you remember and what you want to, what leaves an impression, not what's important. When I get home, he's online, forwards me a link about Morton Thomas, a 61-year-old Harvard graduate, cum laude, former lawyer, current homeless shelter resident. Your next career path, he semicolons. He wants to know what the novel's really about. I'm going on about Freud's screed memories, his analysis of the abstruse subject he describes as a man of 38 with a university education and interest in psychological questions, who's really himself, at least in text. The best thing I read about the essay calls it a puzzle about beginnings. Charles agrees that I write with the same labyrinthine rhythm. I just add the relative pronouns my subject matter. What you cover up says more about you than what you reveal. I like the essay because it offers his repeated thesis. The raw material of autobiographical memory remains what I construct consciously, almost like works of fiction. We know now only what arouses us to remember as we want to see again. I chase that quote from Marcel Duchamp that I altered to fit here better. My intention is always to get away from myself, though I know perfectly well that I'm using myself. Call it a little game between I and me. There's a lag with Charles's I ams, so I switched to polyaminos to illustrate it. He jokes that he likes to play Tetris too. Understands why I scare guys. I say the novel's about Tetris intimacy. We search for shapes to fit together. That assembled line disappears. We go again. Thanks.